Hello guys, Ivan Kivius here and welcome to Shark Numbers. There are several categories of crypto founders. Finance guys would be one example. There are people from the finance sector, including venture capitalists and bankers. Traditionalists who transitioned from the classic finance sector into the modern one, full of immersive tech. Then there is a part of crypto community that consists of marketing and salespeople. Sometimes these individuals come up with exclusive and thought-provoking concepts that help generate new use cases within the ecosystem. Finally, my favorite type of crypto founders, tech guys. These individuals make crypto possible. These very people are the definition of crypto. A person who creates technology is the most significant creator within the crypto world. There is no crypto without technology. Tech guys represent the very root of a crypto tree that is full of participants, full of actors of every kind. My following guest is this type of crypto founder. He's a crypto nerd that makes crypto possible. In this interview, I will be speaking with Dan Hughes, the founder of Radix DLT. Dan is a true pioneer of new tech. He founded Radix back in 2013 when the majority of people did not know much about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies yet. I hope you will enjoy watching my conversation with Dan. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Without further ado, let's get rolling. Okay, well, first off, thanks for joining this call. I really appreciate your time. You're one of those few individuals in the crypto space who fits the definition of a crypto nerd, and I enjoy speaking with these kind of people. So thanks again for joining.
No problem, my pleasure.
Yeah, so Dan, I have prepared a lot of questions. If you at some point get tired, just let me know.
Okay.
All right, Dan, you started this journey almost 10 years ago. You founded Radix DLT when most people didn't even know anything about the concept of cryptocurrency. What has changed over the past 10 years? Does the crypto space evolve as you envisioned, or were there things that you did not expect to see?
That's a good question. I mean, of course, it's evolved, right? It's evolved a lot. And I think it's a mix. So there's quite a few things that I thought might happen, or, different types of projects that might come along that have. And there's also a lot of things that happen that I didn't expect, right? So I suppose the main thing was I expected it to really follow Satoshi's vision a little bit closer for a bit longer before kind of large financial institutions took interest, right? I thought that the grassroots movement would self-regulate that a little bit more. That wasn't the case. And then a lot of that has kind of led to it starting to feel a little bit like the traditional financial system, right? You've got hedge funds and VCs and kind of Wall Street type individuals that are very active in the space. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's a kind of inflow of capital that would be outside the economy. But I just don't think the right safeguards are in place. It's a different space to what traditional finance is. And I think a lot of mistakes have been made that have either intentionally or honestly cost people a lot of money, right?
When you talk about these big players, when you talk about VCs, regulators, do you think that this kind of dynamics is inevitable? Do you think that at some point the space of cryptocurrency will, reach its true independence, will reach this like utopian stage?
Yeah, that's you're coming in with some deep questions straight off. I like it. If I'm completely honest, I think that the utopian Satoshi vision I think maybe that boat has sailed, unfortunately. And I think the reason for that is because crypto grew too slowly, right? Bitcoin grew too slowly. And so I feel like we've lost a lot of the control in terms of, regulation and the kind of big picture institutions. I think that this industry has lost some of the control that it had in the beginning. If we'd have grown quickly, and if we'd have grown in a kind of unified direction, I think we would have been able to set the terms, I think, a bit more, which would have been beneficial for all, because the guys that were in the space early on really understood what was trying to be achieved. And I think that's been lost a little bit because, the space has grown, and there's a lot less kind of, purists, if you like, right? There's a much, much greater mix of people, whereas back in the day, it was very much about decentralization and sovereignty and all of those kind of important aspects of Satoshi's vision, and other people as well, right? It wasn't just Satoshi that had these ideals, but that's been watered down a little. And I think Satoshi left at the wrong time as well. Bitcoin was still very much kind of like a young child, I guess, and its parent disappeared and left to kind of fend by itself. So I think some mistakes have been made in the growth of the industry. I think maybe we've lost some controlling influence that the industry as a whole could kind of mold where things go. I don't think it's game over, right? I just think it's going to be a little bit harder to achieve that utopian,
When you talk about Satoshi Nakamoto, do you think he is a good coder or just a visionary with average skills?
Yeah. Well, I myself am not a great coder. And Satoshi's code, from opinions that I've read, it wasn't the best code either. But you don't have to be a great coder to be able to put together revolutionary ideas, right? You just need to know enough so that you can take what's up here and put it down there. And then you can pass that on to other people who are great coders to, polish it and make it run better and catch the bugs, etc. That's kind of what I do at Radix, right? I'm kind of running ahead of the main team, doing research and development on what may or may not be coming down the pipe in the future and interesting things that we can do. And then those ideas are what then get refined. My code itself is pretty awful, but that's not my skill, right? My skill is the R&D.
So when you talk about imperfections of blockchains, and Radix is designed to tackle a lot of problems related to speed and security. So what do you think about people like Vitalik Buterin, Gavin Wood, Charles Hopkinson, who all outline unique benefits of their technologies, but maybe those technologies are not perfect? So how do you view those people in the field who work side by side with you? They develop something else, but they ultimately contribute to it.
This technology is extremely complicated, right? There's a lot of moving parts. You've got the kind of pure technical issues of consensus and security and decentralization, but there's that economic aspect on top as well, which plays very much also into decentralization and security, right? So there's a lot of disciplines that in their own right are, it takes years to become an expert in those disciplines independently. And then you're building these kind of systems and you have to become an expert in all these different aspects of what it is you're trying to build. So anybody that's been able to develop a protocol and launch that protocol, regardless of what its ultimate shortcomings may be, deserve a lot of respect because it's a hard thing to do. So I respect everybody in this space who is developing. And just because I may not agree with the direction they're going in, it doesn't mean that I don't respect the effort and the motivation that they put in to build what they build. So, I guess that answers your question, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about your project. Your project is hugely undervalued, in my opinion. I think it deserves more coverage. It deserves more attention. And people don't yet realize the scale of innovation you guys offer to the community. Can you please explain how Radix simplifies the development process? And how do you think this concept that you already have, how this concept, this Lego type concept will evolve further. Will building DeFi applications at some point be as easy as using social media websites? Will everyone just be able to utilize drag and drop functionality and launch professional DeFi applications without coding skills, coding knowledge? And if so, how long will it take us to reach this stage?
Okay. I think there's multiple aspects of Radix which tackle different kind of subdomains of cryptos, right? You've got the scalability, you've got decentralization, security, DeFi, and developers is probably the most important in like short, medium term thing, right? Because developing smart contracts that are secure and reliable is extremely difficult at the moment. The reason for that is that the languages and the tools that are used, they don't play very well with the concepts of financial instruments, right? So Solidity, for example, it's Turing complete, but it's very much your traditional kind of object-oriented language. And you don't really want that with DeFi or when you're moving assets around. And the reason for that is that Solidity has no concept about what an asset is, right? There are no fundamentals about the behavior of an asset and what it can and can't do. And so if you're developing a DeFi application in Solidity, you either have to take somebody else's code and import that into your project, somebody who's figured out what all those constraints are, right? Which even the most basic constraint, like if I give you a $10 note while it's in your possession, I can't do anything with that $10 note, right? But those concepts just aren't there. So you have to either build it yourself. And so there's a lot of, reinventing the wheel all the time, or you have to trust that somebody else's code and a piece of smart contract code that they've done that job and they've done it correctly. And there are some fundamentals around the language as well, like reentrancy attacks and stuff where I can just repeatedly call the same function. And these simple mistakes can lead to hundreds of millions of dollars being lost. Somebody spots this bug or it gets called inadvertently, and then all of a sudden, a pool is drained of hundreds of millions. And so the approach that we took was, okay, what if you had a language that did have this understanding, this concept of what an asset can and can't do baked into it, right? So that if I give you a $10 note, I can't do anything with that $10 note, right? Whereas in Solidity, I could give you that $10 note and I can still mess around with it. It doesn't make sense, right? That's not how assets work in the real world. And that's kind of where we started with Scripto. And it turns out that a lot of these simple mistakes that you can make that lead to these exploits are just simply impossible because of the way that, for a start, the Scripto language is an extension of Rust. So there's a lot of these concepts kind of in there for free. If there's any Rust developers watching, they'll probably already figure out what I'm referring to. And then you can build this kind of slim extension on top, which defines what you can and can't do with assets, right? So tokens, NFTs, whatever, right? You can very, very strictly define the behavior so that if your developer is trying to do an action that doesn't correspond to what an asset can do in the real world, then the code simply just won't even compile. We'll just say that you can't compile this, let alone run it and deploy it. And so that alone adds such a large amount of additional security to smart contracts that will be developed within Radix. And then the tooling then becomes a lot simpler as well, because you can borrow a lot of this tooling from Rust, which gives you a lot of these concepts baked in already. And then on top of that, all you then need to really build is some, a small slither of additional tooling so that your developers are able to interface what they're building with the ledger and the various different APIs in a simple manner. And when you think about it, another benefit of a language where it has these concepts baked in already is that your developers can then spend a lot more time building their application and not worrying about, okay, have I got all the bugs caught in this thing? Are my assets behaving correctly? Are there any re-entrancy attacks that could possibly be done? And so instead of spending 90% of the time auditing that code and 10% of the time building, you can essentially switch that the other way around, which hopefully will lead to more, vibrant applications, and people will build things that we potentially haven't seen yet because they got a lot more confidence.
WordPress enabled anyone to create a professional looking simple website from scratch. Back then, you had to hire programmers to create an online publication. Right now, you can create an online publication by installing and customizing a template. Mm-hmm. And so now you no longer need developers for something simple, but you still need developers for complex applications, for smart contracts. Do you think that at some point tools will evolve to the point when the profession coder developer will go obsolete?
I don't think professional developers will ever go obsolete, right? You will always need somebody with wizard level expertise to build.
Who designs these tools, right? Right.
Yeah. So but from the point of view of your kind of more casual developers, and yeah, for sure, the tools can definitely be more friendly towards those kind of developers, right? Much in the same way where, like you say, you can build a website now. Or if you do need to do any kind of programming for your website, then there's these drag and drop tools that just auto generate JavaScript and HTML for you for the most part. And you only have to spend a small amount of time actually, putting these pieces together and a bit of glue in the middle to make sure that they all do what you want them to do. And I definitely think if you've got a good, strong foundation in place for a smart contract language that can carry a lot of that heavy lifting for you, then there is absolutely scope for drag and drop tools, right? So you can say, okay, I want this component, and that's going to then do some processing, and the output from what that has done is going to get fed into this next component and another. And so you get, DeFi Lego, right? And then you can click generate, and it will generate some code, and all you then have to do is kind of minimal work just to make sure that it's behaving as you expect it to, and that if you've got a front end, there are some integration points for your front end.
I want to share something with you and hear your thoughts on the subject.
Sure.
Sometimes I'm thinking in the future, the way we run transactions will change drastically. Like instead of one main currency created and controlled by the government, there would be millions of different currencies created by people and businesses. There would be a sort of ecosystem of currencies. When people can design anything, any DeFi tool or cryptocurrency without coding knowledge, there will be a new shift in human evolution. So hundreds of millions of digital currencies created by people and businesses could be used and exchanged daily, powering people, not just governments, but people. Millions of DeFi tools could power the ecosystem, helping people flip those tokens smoothly in real time. So in this hypothetical scenario, a dentist could sell their dental services for their coin, like dental coin. And if I want to use their services, but I don't have the dental coin in my wallet, I could use an application that automatically exchanges the available currency in my wallet, the money of my choice, for the end currency, and clear the payment, clear the transaction. There would be an infrastructure in place. I could pay with whatever I want to pay, with the currency I want, and it would automatically exchange my crypto into another crypto when I make a payment. There would be a sort of aggregator of exchanges in place. And with my purchase, with my transaction, I would be powering a local business currency, the liquidity providers, the payment application creators, and other parties involved. So there would be like millions of unique trading pairs and more liquidity providers. Is it something that you think hypothetically possible, or you think regulators will just shut all the ideas down?
Yeah.
What is your vision of the DeFi space? Could you share some of your own unique thoughts on the future of DeFi?
Sure. So, and I think that what you've just explained from a technical perspective is already possible, right? We have automated market makers, we have liquidity swap pools, etc. You can make a token. So you could have dental coin, and then there would be some liquidity providers that facilitate the transfer of, token X to token dental coin, right? you could already do that today. I think the things that are missing that would enable that to become an absolute reality, where everybody potentially has their own token that represents their own sovereignty and their own, personal digital currency that they can use in the metaverse, let's say. You really need scalability, right? Whether that's on a single platform or if you've got, multiple platforms. But even if you were to go multi-chain with that, there still wouldn't be enough across all of the chains currently launched. And then you need a layer 0 or some kind of bridging technology to stitch those things together, which are very difficult to build. But let's say that scalability in some way is solved and bridges are reliable. Then the next thing that you would need to have in place would be a better user experience, right? The user experience right now sucks everywhere. And so even with all of this technical ability, if people get confused trying to use it, then they're not going to use it, right? So like I say, you could implement that today to some degree that would be functional and would be usable. But then how do you onboard users, right? How do you ensure that users come in and they're able to make their tokens and do it without having to spend 3 days researching DeFi or how to, generate a private key and store it securely and all these other things. So the user experience is probably the more short-term thing that we need to solve as an industry, because there's a lot of skepticism out there, obviously, because that kind of refers a little bit to the point I made before about us losing control as an industry of where the ship was sailing to some degree. But there's also a lot of anxiety as well, because your kind of mass market users are reading about these DeFi hacks and things, people losing keys and don't understand, well, what is a hardware wallet? Why do I need one? How can I do self-custody? What other options are there? Is it safe to store it on this exchange? Et cetera, et cetera. And the problem is that if you go to most FAQs about this stuff, they're all extremely technical in the way that they're written. So that doesn't really solve the problem, right? So we really need to get the user experience nailed down. And then we need the developer tools that allow developers to build these things with confidence, and to be able to actually easily put these applications together so that you don't just have a pool of, what is it at the moment, about 2,000 or 3,000 DeFi developers that actually have the skills available to build these kind of applications. You want that to be like JavaScript, right? Where even your most casual developer can put these things together, deploy them, and it's almost a drag and drop, click and plug and play kind of affair. And then you need to have the scalability behind all of that to power what you were suggesting. So I definitely think it will go that way. I think you'll have. I think the first way we'll see that manifest is content creators. I think content creators will probably be the main driver of something like that to start with. You'll start to get these social content platforms over the next couple of years that pop up, and these social content creators will obviously have their own tokens as a means to fund their content creation. So I think you will start to see what you've just explained start about there.
Well, my main question is, when we were talking about Satoshi Nakamoto and the utopian idea, right, that the power goes back to people, do you think it will be possible, or the governments will be scared to the point when they will impose regulations upon regulations to not allow this to happen?
I'm not sure how you would police that, right? It's like I'm prohibited from creating my own token, and then there's a billion other
from, let's say, accepting payments. You have a small business, you're not allowed to accept tokens as a payment. You're only allowed to accept pound or dollar.
But unless they've got an army of people to crawl all of the ledger information of all these hundreds of thousands, millions, or billions of individuals creating these tokens and transacting, that seems like a Herculean effort, right? The amount that would cost to police that, you would be better off just embracing it instead. I mean, like regulators already, they're fairly stretched most of the time anyway. And so to pass a policy like that, it would make their workload just unmanageable. There's, they'd finally knock on your door 30 years after you created your token. It's like you just couldn't do it. So I think the landscape that you're suggesting is definitely possible. I don't think any regulator would try and impose strict policy if a large portion of the populace that is under the jurisdiction of that regulator is creating their own tokens and transacting them. It wouldn't be possible, right? So the regulator would have to figure out a way whereby they can embrace that instead.
I think so too. In developed countries, maybe in like developing or third world countries, there'll be more friction, but in civilized countries and countries that embraced technologies that were created in the past, then I think like countries like the UK and the US would embrace it at some point. Okay, so let's go. Yeah.
Just thinking about that, a final point actually is that could actually start first in, kind of third world countries and stuff, right? Especially places where, there is kind of economic unrest or very high inflation and stuff, right? It could actually turn out that you get these kind of micro economies in the little villages and stuff, where everybody's got a cell phone. The currency of that country is, undergoing some hardship. So you might actually see these kind of sovereign micro economies pop up for various towns, and then that's how they do their transacting, right? And you get enough of those towns together, and you put some liquidity pools between those towns, then you can still facilitate trade in your kind of regional area. So it might actually be the other way around, and the regulators in those countries would be even more ill-equipped to deal with something like that.
It makes sense, especially in those countries that experience leapfrogging. Let's move on to the next question. You stepped down as the company CEO. What was the reason for that? Did you get tired, or was it too time consuming, or maybe you realized that someone else can handle it better?
Yeah, the last one. I mean, if you want to be a successful founder, right, you've got to know where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. And a CEO is definitely one of those places where I'm not strong there. It's not something that, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, right, what are my CEO duties today? Yeah. I'm a crypto nerd, as you put it at the beginning. So I just want to go and do crypto nerdy stuff. So I always knew that if we got to the point where we got to a certain size, that I would have to step down as CEO and find somebody else to take that place. And from there, I transitioned to CTO for a while. But again, it's kind of very much the same story, right? I can do the CTO work, but I'm not the best CTO. I'm best when I'm playing with things and I'm doing R&D and pushing the envelope. That's what really gets my juices flowing. So after a while, we found a CTO as well, and we've got a great one in Russ. So I'm now where I'm best positioned, which is, coding cave, grinding away with crazy ideas, trying not to burn the building down,
You have a child. Do you have one child or several kids?
Yeah, I got a little boy, 2 daughters.
When your children grow up, what experience or what type of wisdom do you want them to inherit from you?
I think the best one is probably to be humble and know there's always somebody smarter than you lurking, either in the room or just outside, and not to get too confident and definitely not too arrogant, because that's when you make mistakes, right? If you think you're always the smartest guy in the room, it gives you a false confidence, and then you become arrogant, and that's when you screw up. And you won't realize you've screwed up until it's too late and the house is on fire. So just kind of, keep your feet in the soil, I guess.
All right. You spent decades working with code. As a professional coder, you understand that almost everything can be automated and programmed. When I look at people, I see a lot of repetition in their actions, especially older people. They speak in patterns, like, this uncle who visits you and you can pretty much predict what that person is going to say. Like, don't you feel that humans were artificially designed by someone or something? What is your take on religion?
I'm not religious at all. That doesn't mean that I'm not wrong. But I just don't really see. I don't see any real evidence of it. And I'm a guy that kind of, if I can touch it and I can see it and I can hear it, then that's what I need. And if I can test it, right? But then it leads to some paradoxical questions as well that don't make any sense. Like, if God created the universe and all that's in it, then who created God, right? And then it just becomes turtles all the way down. But maybe the answer to that question isn't, our feeble minds just can't process it, I guess. But at the same time, I get myself into a real twist sometimes, because I start to think about, space and physics and where did we come from and why and all this kind of stuff. And you just end up getting into like, to use a programming nerd term, a race condition, where you just go round and round and round in circles, and it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? It's like, why is all this here? Yeah, what is the reason for it? You can explain the physics to a point, Big Bang or whatever your preferred, or creationism or whatever, but you always end up at a question that ends up in a race condition, and that perplexes me. Absolutely perplexes me. And just the miracle of life as well is insane. Like, you've got these chemical processes that happen and you can explain it, but once you get past that, it's like, but the complexity is insane, absolutely insane. I think the thing that blew me away the most over the past couple of years was, I forgot the name of them now, but if you go into a cell, then there's these things that walk, and they're pulling, whether they are minerals or proteins or something, and there's these chemical elements that walk around in your cells, and it's like, what? How deep does all this stuff go, right? Like, there's things in every single cell in my body right now that are walking, dragging some protein to a different place in the cell, because that's what the cell needs. It's insane. So I keep an open mind, but until I see something that convinces me of a higher power, then I'm still going to keep that open mind.
Do you think that DNA is the best code that has ever been written?
DNA is interesting, right? Because you've just got these kind of 4 chemical building blocks, and you put them together in a certain way, and you get this, right? And the information density of DNA is insane. Like, if we could get our information density anywhere near what DNA has, then you'd be able to store, everybody would be able to store a copy of the internet as it is today, right? It's crazy. Is it the best code? I mean, you get mutations and stuff, right? Because the chemical processes go wrong. And I don't understand enough about biology and genetics to be able to say if it's good code or not. But I do find it fascinating. It is something that I want to one day, when I've got a bit more time, dig into a little bit more, because it is code at the end of the day, right? So if you can program in one language, then you should be able to program in another. And I had a friend who was into all of his kind of biology and the CRISPR stuff and everything, and we'd have long conversations. Mainly he'd speak and I'd be quiet and listen at his knowledge to try and soak it all in. So there's so much to learn, right? Always so much to learn. We're not here long enough, unfortunately, I don't think.
Right. Dan, before we end this conversation, I would like to ask you a set of short questions that require very little thinking. These questions can be answered in 1-2 sentences. First one, suppose you are not allowed to touch a computer ever again. What profession would you choose for yourself?
Something to do with cars. I'm a total petrol head. So if I wasn't allowed to touch a computer ever again, then yeah, I would just go and play with engines,
Okay.
and maybe do some music creation as well. But I wouldn't be able to use like Reason or Fruity Loops or anything, right? Because I can't touch computers, so it'd be all analog.
Next question. Name at least one profession of the future that currently does not exist, but surely will in the DeFi world as the space evolves.
Ooh. That's actually a difficult question because there's so many places this could go. I'm going to say NFT pawn shop. There you go.
That's a good one.
Something crazy.
Very creative one. Okay. Suppose you are on a deserted island and had to survive for 1 month. You are all by yourself, but you are allowed to bring one crypto influencer with you. Who would this person be and why?
One crypto influencer. Probably Eric Wall, because I don't think there'd ever be a dull moment with Eric around.
Okay. Last question. What celebration song will you play when Radix hits its next major milestone?
Ooh. Oh, I'm such a music file. That's incredibly difficult. Probably something by The Prodigy, but I can't think of one right now that fits.
Okay. Well, I'm done with all of my questions. I want to give you an opportunity to make announcements if you have any, or say something you think hasn't been said or mentioned before. There may be something on your mind that you feel like sharing. Please go ahead.
Sure. So I suppose probably the biggest thing that I could tell your listeners to go and look at right now is the RadFi keynotes that we did in early December, if they haven't already. So a bit earlier on, we were talking about the user experience and how that needs to be kind of improved a lot. And the RadFi keynotes that we did in December got a lot into kind of wallet experiences, user experience, all these different things that you would expect, a user would expect to be able to do in a wallet, and how they can be streamlined, how you can make it easier for users. So the ultimate aim is so that they don't even realize that there's crypto and DeFi behind this application. It just feels natural as they would a very polished banking application. And there's a bunch of other stuff in there as well, but seeing as we were talking about user experience, that's probably the best thing for your listeners to go and have a look at.
All right. Thanks for your time, Dan. I had a great pleasure speaking with you. I would happily meet you in person if you ever make it to Florida, or maybe we could meet in the UK when I'm there. And
yeah, sure. If I'm ever in Florida or you're in the UK, then yeah, let's exchange.
Yeah, I hope to speak with you once again. Thanks so much, and have a great evening.
And you have a great evening.
Thanks. This was Dan Hughes, the founder of Radix, and simply a valuable representative of the crypto community. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, you know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel if you're not yet subscribed. I will greatly appreciate it. I'm done for now. I'll talk to you soon. Ivan KV out.